Well, it's a real pleasure for me to be here with y'all today, and I was just in Lebanon last week, and so I've come today to share what I saw. As the good doctor said, I'm a state judge. I'm an elected judge. I'm serving in my third term in the judicial branch of our government in Alabama. Alabama is a great state. We constantly strive to live up to the high standards set by the University of Alabama football team. Good job. But what I bring to the discussion today is, of course, my service as a judge. And as a judge, of course, laws that are passed in places such as this and in the State House in Montgomery, they're high-minded and they try to do the right thing. But at some point in time, the law must be applied to real people and real cases and real situations. It's where the rubber meets the road is in the courtroom, and so it's my job as judge to apply the laws to cases that arise. It's also my job as a judge to evaluate evidence, courtroom quality evidence, to say whether or not a person is entitled to relief or not. That is in the judicial forum. We are not in a judicial forum, and so I'm not here as a judge. I know it says that on my tag, judge and so forth, but I'm not here in my capacity as a judge. I'm here in my capacity as a witness. And I have promised the people that I spoke with in Lebanon that when I came back home that I would come to a place such as this and be in front of a crowd such as this and to tell them exactly what I saw and what I heard from them. And so I'm here to report to you about that. First of all, we need to put it in the context, the refugee problem in the context in which it exists. That is the war in Syria. The war in Syria has many more consequences beside the refugee issue. There was a very good article in the Washington Post, August the 29th, written by, as a columnist, by Ms. Applebaum, and she set out the very statistics of what this war has created. And it is a well-sourced document, so I don't mind sharing it with you. And she said that this war has created casualties. The range is between 155,000 to 400,000 people, depending on who's counting. In the month of August, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights had a total of 14,711 dead children caused by this war. Since the Islamic State was created the Caliphate in Syria, an estimated 2,350 civilians have been executed by the group. That's executions. They cut their heads off. The life expectancy in Syria has dropped from 80 years to 55 years. According to the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, there are 4.8 million registered Syrian refugees as of August the 16th, 2016. There are thought to be an additional 2 million refugees who remain inside of Syria, but who are displaced from their homes. 3/4 of those who have fled their homes are women and children. Most own nothing except what they're wearing. To put this into context, in the 1990s, the Yugoslavia wars, the Balkan wars, produced 2.3 million refugees, a number which was considered at the time to be the worst refugee crisis since the 1940s. This is twice the amount of the Balkan War refugee problem. In terms of destruction, the city of Aleppo, the ancient city of Aleppo, one of our presidential candidates don't know what that is, but it has been destroyed. Basra, destroyed. Palmyra, irreparably damaged. Last month, the Syrian government bombed 4 makeshift hospitals at a blood bank in Aleppo. With regard to the refugee situation, there are 4.3 million registered refugees. They're living in 5 countries: Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, and Egypt. And just to give you a context, in Turkey, which has 79 million people, there are 2.5 million Syrian refugees, 3% of the population. In Jordan, there are 635,000 refugees in a country of 8.1 million, 8% of the population. In Iraq, there are 245,000 Syrian refugees in a country of 37 million. That is 7% of the population. In Egypt, a country of 117 million people, a country of 88 million people, there are 117,000 refugees, 0.1%. In Lebanon, a country that now has 6.1 million people. Before the refugee crisis, we had 4 million people. But we have 1.1 million registered refugees. That is 22% of the resident population. 1 in 5 are Syrian refugees. Now, as my friend over here said, we have Palestinian refugees, we have Iraqi refugees, we have many other refugees. But this latest group, 22% of the population. That's the registered ones. Now, what I saw. During the period of August the 27th till September the 1st, I was in the country. I traveled by car from Beirut north to Kesawan, to Juni, to Jbail, to Sheka, then up the Kadisha Valley to the Cedar Grove, over the Mount Sanin to Dar Amr, to Baalbek. From Baalbek, I traveled in the Bekaa Valley south to Bertal, to Talia, to Riek, and to Zahli. From Zahli, we went to, on the road from Dar Amr, we saw along the road refugee enclaves. These were not nice, neat, white UN tents. These were Bedouin tents, all along the road, out in the fields. And it's like I say, as a judge, I want to know, is this anecdotal, is this situational, or is it systemic? So when I came back home, I looked up to get the gold standard about refugees in Lebanon. That would be the UN High Commissioner reports. The UN High Commissioner report says that 1/3 of the registered refugees in Lebanon are living in such Bedouin camps. They're not living in organized places. They're living in camps such as this. So what I saw, maybe anecdotal, but the UN report says that it is systemic. On the other route I traveled was from Zahli going down to Anjar, Majd al-Anjar, and then to the border crossing at Mazna. From there we turned south and we went to a place called Sultan Ya'ub, I don't know if you know where that is, and we visited the town of Aita and then to Maduha, which is a Sunni town. Along the way we passed a town called Baryez. Used to be a Christian town, now it's a Sunni town. Now there's something about Baryez that I didn't realize. All of the affluent from Zahli, which is a town of 200,000 people, flows down the Burdani River and it lands at a creek that goes through Baryez. It is an open sewer. They irrigate their crops from that sewer. And along the lines of the open sewer are refugees. They live right next to it, cheek to jowl. Now I thought, well, is that anecdotal, is it situational, or is it widespread? In the UN reports, and I have a copy of it, it says that fully 92% of the sewage in Lebanon goes out to sea or into open creeks. You cannot eat the vegetables that come out of those fields because they're irrigated with sewage, with human sewage. And the refugees are living right next to it. I talked to a man who goes down to that refugee camp daily to find out how many people live out there in that area, Baryez, in the central Bekaa Valley. The United Nations report says the official count is around 250,000. So I asked him, how many? He said 750,000. 750,000. When it comes to the birth rate, as Nemeth said, the UN report says 51,000 births. That's up until 2015. That doesn't count 2016. The question is, how can we have so many more? And everybody told me that the official number of 1.1 is not the right count. Those are the folks who are registered. That is, that they are documented. At the end of 2014 and the start of 2015, the Lebanese government, in an effort to stem the flow of refugees, because the number went from 100,000 in 2013 to 1 million in 2014. And as the other speakers have said, it was a challenge because it could disrupt the delegate balance in Lebanon. And so the Ministry of Social Affairs passed new rules that said that the people coming in had to be documented, they had to live in areas contiguous to Lebanon, they had to have a $200 charge to get a visa to come in, and they had to be in immediate need. And that did stem the flow of official documented refugees into Lebanon after 2015. But the law of unintended consequences has taken place. What's happened now is we have smuggling in of Syrian refugees into Lebanon. These are war refugees, some for sure, some are economic refugees. I was also told that many Syrian businessmen, Syrian industrialists, who can no longer do business in Syria because of the war, have moved their operations across the border into Lebanon, into Zahli, Christian town, and there they recruit refugees from the refugee camps, some of them who have been smuggled in across the border, which is very porous. And they're working the refugees in their businesses, which have been dislocated from Syria. I've talked to Christian families who have stayed in Lebanon, despite the fact that many of their family members have immigrated to the United States or elsewhere, who have stayed there, who have built their homes there, who've had their families there, who have their grandchildren there. And I asked them, how is the situation in Lebanon? And the ones who have stayed there, you know what they told me? There's no hope here. No hope here. Why is that? Because we are being displaced. Our businesses are being displaced. Our workers are being displaced. And if there's anything that will cause the Christians of Lebanon to leave the country, it's not that they'll be intimidated. It's not that they'll be forced out by force of arms. Our people know how to hold on to their place. But they would be displaced by economic forces.
Yes.
That's what would displace them. I had one fellow who works in Beirut. He's an IT specialist. And he works at a bank. He makes about $1,000 a month, which is not bad for Lebanon. He told me of a case where a PhD in robotics from Syria, a refugee, who made in Syria $15,000 a month. That's a high earner in Syria. Came to his company, needed work, underbid his job at $1,000 a month. And that was repeated many times. So that even white-collar workers now are being displaced because the labor markets are being undercut by the cheap labor coming in from Syria. For sure, there are war refugees among the Syrians coming across. People who have lost their homes and they've lost everything. But because of the nature of the Lebanese state, as Naaman said, the government is paralyzed. There is no president. There's been no president for 2 years. The last president's term expired in 2014. The parliament, which was its mandate expired in 2013. It was continued again until 2014. And now it's due to expire in November of 2016, this year, 2 months. Yet there's no president. I don't know how they'll conduct elections. The whole process of government has been paralyzed. They have a caretaker government. Now, what does this mean? When I asked one of the guys who's about to be displaced, I said, what will happen? He said, if this situation is not addressed within the next year, there will be unrest in this country. The unemployment rate is 25% among the resident Lebanese. They are a generous people. They have taken more refugees than any other country. But you can only take so much. You have to be able to hold yourself. And if this happens, and if the Lebanese start to migrate out because they cannot support their families there, if the economic situation is so bad. Right now, according to the CIA World Book, Christians make up 40% of the population. And 40% of the population, that is the highest portion of Christian people of any country in the region. Even though there are more in other countries, 40% is the highest percentage of any country, which means that they have the ability to have a voice in public affairs. Right now, under the National Pact, under the Taif Accords, they have a 50% share of the government, and they have the presidency. There is pressure right now to turn that from a 50-50 proposition to a third, and a third. If we lose more than 40% of the population, if it goes down to a third of the population, then the 50% proposition becomes less tenable. If it drops down to that, you will see an exodus. If that happens, Prime Minister Refugee Career, before he died, he told me that without Lebanon's Christians, Lebanon is not Lebanon. It's something else. It's just any other Arab country. And you would have Shiite against Sunni in Lebanon. Lebanon, instead of being a containment state, which it is right now, Tom Friedman, who writes for the New York Times, said that Lebanon, along with Jordan, Tunisia, Turkey, are countries that need to be amplified. What they're doing is right. They're integrated, and they are tolerant, and they're pluralistic. And those are the countries we need to help. There are other countries that are not that way, need to be contained. But if Lebanon were to lose its Christian character, instead of being a frontline state, it would become a failed state. And we all know what happens with failed states. They become fertile ground for ISIS and Qaeda and everything else. And you will have ISIS and Qaeda and all these others, not in some country in the interior, but on the Eastern Mediterranean. On the Eastern Mediterranean, exposing Europe and everyone else. So that is what is at stake. Now, as for what we should do about it, if we wait for courtroom-style evidence to show up, courtroom-style evidence is not going to show up. Policy is not made based on courtroom evidence. But I'll tell you, in a courtroom, you can be found liable in damages if you do something wrong, just as easily as if you fail to do what you should have done. That's called an omission. Errors or omissions can get you in trouble with the jury. So when it comes to policy such as this, the price of doing nothing is high. When something should have been done in 2013 and nothing was done, look at the result. Even the European Union itself has been destabilized by the flow of refugees. So the price of doing nothing is high. I want to leave you just with one quote. I know everybody has been given a quote this conference, and they quote Teddy Roosevelt quite a bit. And I have a very good Teddy Roosevelt quote I'm going to give to you. And he says this: in any moment of decision, the best thing that you can do is to do your best, to do the right thing. The next best thing you can do is to do the wrong thing. And the worst thing you can do is to do nothing.
Beautiful.
Thank you.